Coach Steve here. We're going to talk a little bit about the 6-2 offense today, so let's get right into it. So we're going to talk about your rotated positions first, then we're going to talk a little bit about base positions, and then we'll walk through some rotations, particularly on the serve-receive side. So let's walk through that quickly. All right, so rotated positions, what are they? You'll hear them called rotated positions, rotational positions. It's the order you need to be in when the other team serves. You'll have a setter. In the 6-2, we usually start with the setter in the number 1 position, unless we're receiving, and then we will rotate back 1. So the setter is where the outside hitter is right now. So everybody will be rotated 1 back counterclockwise from this setup that I'm showing you. But this would assume we're serving. We'd have a outside, a middle, an opposite or right side hitter, and another outside and another middle, and that would be how we would be set up. Base positions are where you play defense when the ball is on their side of the court. And in this case, we have everyone kind of in rotation, but our base positions, let's say we're serving, we'd like to get our opposite or right side hitter on the right side in the front, our outside hitter or left side hitter on the left side, so they would switch and the middle would stay where they are. Now, in our defense and many defenses, in the back row, we actually have the base position for the player playing middle on the left side, and we have the base position for the player playing left side in the middle of the court. So those two would switch as well. So it would look something like this once we serve. We would go to these positions. Now you'll notice that I have the blockers pinched here. Your coach may want the blockers wider or differently. Every coach will be a little different. And this is for a defense called, it's really in between a middle defense and a perimeter defense, but this is what we will play as a team. Your coach may have you play something different. So let's talk about rotated or rotational positions. How can I tell if I'm in rotation? Well, the first and best way is to know who is on either side of you. So, or who is in front of you in rotation and in back of you in rotation. And you want to stay in between those two players all the way around the clock as we go. So in this case, the outside hitter knows there's a middle behind me and there's an opposite in front of me. Now, you can also look across from you, and if you're an outside hitter and you see an outside hitter on the diagonal across from you, you're probably in rotation. If you see somebody else, one of you is probably out of rotation. Other things you look for, let's say I'm a middle in the back, I cannot overlap or be ahead of or behind the outside to my left and the setter to my right, and I cannot be in front of the middle in the front row. So that's another thing to think about. All right. So another thing you want to remember is we rotate in a clockwise manner. So we would move from one to the other. So we're in rotation 1 at the start of the game. Let's talk about some of the substitutions we might make and how the game will flow. So we'll put our team out like this, and the referee will come up and check and make sure we're in order. We're where we're supposed to be in rotation, and the proper players are on the court. Once they do that, they will signal that the libero, who can play back row position for any player, we typically play them for the middle, but that's not required. But just to keep it simple, in this example, throughout, we're going to have the libero switch with the middle and the back row. So the middle would come out, the libero would come in, and we would be ready to play. Now, let's go to rotation 2. Now, in rotation 2, the libero's in the back, the setter's in the back, and we don't have any changes to make. But we are in a different rotation. And later, I'll show you how we would set up to serve-receive in this rotation. Next, in rotation 3, notice that our libero is now in the front row, and that's not allowed, and we have a middle on the bench. We also have a middle in the back row who we'd like the libero to go in for, but the rules say that the libero has to sit out for one rally before they come in, unless they're going to serve. And I'll show you that here. We're actually going to have our libero serve for the middle, who just came into the serving position in position 1 in the back row. Let's walk through that. First things first, we'll exchange the libero and the middle that they came in for. So that you have to put the middle who the libero came in for back in before you can do anything else. And they have to exchange. It's not a substitution. They have to exchange it behind the 10-foot line or the 3-meter line. Now, we still can bring the libero in to serve, and we're going to do that. So what we would do is we would bring the libero over here and take that middle out, and now they would be ready to serve and go across the back row again. So now we move into rotation 4. Now we're running a 6-2, and notice in a 6-2 we want to play the setter from the back row, and we have a setter in the front row, and we're taking advantage of the opportunity to bring in a front row player, an opposite or a right side hitter, instead of letting the setter go all the way around. So let's see what that would look like. At this point, we're going to make 2 substitutions. The first substitution is going to be in front of the 10-foot line, and we'll bring in the opposite player, another right side hitter, and we'll bring the setter off. But now we don't have a setter on the court, so we need to bring a setter in for the opposite, who is in the serving position right now. And we would go and they would exchange again in front of the 10-foot line, and then they would go and play the point. So that's rotation 4. Now in rotation 5, there really isn't a lot to do. We've got front row players in the front and back row players in the back, and we'll talk again about how to serve receive in this situation separately. So now we're in rotation 6. We're moving to rotation 6, and notice that again our libero is in the front row, which they can't be, so that means we need to exchange behind the 10-foot line for the other middle, and we'll do that. And we can only have the libero serve for one player, or I won't say one player, one position on the court. And we had them serve in rotation 3. So that's the only rotation that they can serve in. So now the other middle needs to serve, or we could bring in a sub to do that. So that's how you rotate through all of this. Let's take a look at how we would go to base position. And again, reminding you, base position is where we go when the ball goes on their side of the net. Now, we need to qualify that just a little bit. The first ball over, especially against a team that might put the ball back over on the first touch, you may want to stay in position just to see if they're going to play the ball and then make your change. You'll figure that out as you go along. It takes a little while to get accustomed to when you should leave and get to your base position and when you should just stay where you are, because the ball might be coming right back at you. So that happens, and you'll figure it out. So again, we're going to base positions. This is where we would go to play defense when the ball is on their side. So let's take a look at base positions in the different rotations. There's a few things you need to know that your coach will tell you. I'll tell you what we're doing right now. I would say, okay, you need to know in the front row, where's your position, left, middle, or right? And you need to know in the back row, where's my position, left, middle, or right? And they may or may not be the same thing. You need to understand where we want you to play defense in each of these positions, because defenses are different. And we're going to illustrate the kind of middle, the perimeter style, almost middle defense today. So let's look at an example of that. So we're in rotation 1, and we're going to bring our libero in, and our setter is going to serve. So that's fine, and we're serving. So if we want to go to base positions here, we're going to want to get ready to go to base when the serve is made. So we could do something along these lines, this kind of setup where people are ready to go because we're serving and the ball will be on their side right away. So server serves and we go to base. Again, the setter, and let's say in the back row, our middle player, who's now liberoed out, so there's a libero there. In our defense, we play our libero or middle defender on the left side. So middles need to know, okay, in the back row, my defensive position is left back base. In the front row, my defensive position is middle. Outside hitters need to know in the front row, I'm left side, but in the back row, I'm middle. That's pretty simple, but sometimes we forget. And after a little while, it'll become natural. So let's take a look at serve receive. In serve receive, in rotation 1, we can do this. We can bring an outside back. We can bring the other outside is already in the back row. We can have the opposite middle in the front row, kind of halfway off between the net and the 10-foot line. And they're just going to take short balls. We do this because most of the time, one of the roles an outside hitter has is to be a good passer. They need to be a good attacker and a good passer. So not every team does it this way, but a lot of teams do it this way, and we're going to start with that. Okay, so now the setter is in a position where they are unlikely to take the first ball so they can go play. So that's a good way to start. And if we go to rotation 2 now, look where the setter is. The setter's in the middle. We don't want them to take the first ball. We have an outside hitter in the front row and an outside hitter in the back row, and we'd kind of like the both of them to be in serve receive, so we can do something like this. We can bring our setter up. We can move our libero over, but they cannot go past the setter to the right. If they do, they're out of rotation. And notice here the setter's gotten into a position, actually where she's probably going to set, and allowed the libero to come over, and then the outside hitter would come back. Now we again have two outside hitters and a libero passing. We have a front row ready to go and play offense. Okay? Now in this case, I have the opposite moving over to cover a little bit more of the court. The challenge there is we want that opposite to go, and I like to have the opposite go over and immediately hit right side, and the middle come over and immediately hit middle. That creates a lot of traffic where the setter needs to be to set. So those two players have to be conscious of staying out of the way of the setter. That takes a little practice, and we'll make mistakes with it early on as we do this, but we'll get to where it works well. Okay. So let's go and look at rotation 3. Now, rotation 3, the setter's way over in the left back. How can we do something that will help them? Notice we have a libero in the front. That can't be, so we're going to fix that. We've got the middle coming in behind the 10-foot line because that's where you exchange, and now we're ready to go. To serve receive in this, we can do a little bit of a trick here. It's not really a trick, but we bring our middle all the way over to the line and up front. Because what we're going, and we'll bring our libero in. So I should have done that right away. But then we're going to bring our outside hitter back, and we're going to bring our setter up. Now, the setter can come up as far forward as the middle. The outside from the front row cannot overlap with the middle, but we put the middle in the corner, so that's not happening. They also need to be have 1 foot in front of the outside hitter who was behind them. That's the one in the middle. So the outside hitter in the back who's in the middle and the outside hitter who comes back from the front row, they just need to make sure that the outside hitter who came from the front row is just a little bit in front of the other outside hitter. The setter needs to not go past the middle back row player, or they would be out of rotation. But right now, this is good, and we're ready to go, and we can play, and we've got the same outside libero receive setup. Okay, so in the let me back in here. So it turns out that in the 6-2, rotations 1, 2, and 3 work exactly the same as rotations 4, 5, and 6, except remember the subs that we need to make. We have to sub a setter in for an opposite and an opposite in for a setter. But once we make those changes, it works just exactly like the first 3 rotations I've just shown you. So this is the basics. Ask questions, watch this a couple of times, and you'll really have a much better feel for how this works. Certainly ask me questions in practice. You can ask questions in the comments if I post this, and I probably will post this on my YouTube channel, and have some fun. See you next time.